Hello viewers, welcome to the next video in the tutorial series for Yii framework. In this video, we are going to discuss more about databases. Okay, so first we would recap what we had discussed in part 1 of databases. So we have discussed about how to make a DB connection, that is in two ways. Then we have discussed about database access object, which is actually an object oriented API built on top of PDO, right? Then we discussed about different ways of fetching the data from the database using different SQL execution methods. Okay, in this video what we are going to cover? We are going to cover about non-select queries. Next one is table prefix. So how we can configure table prefix in the DB configuration. And the next one is about the transactions. So let's proceed further on the topics that we have to cover in this tutorial. Okay, so the first one is the non-select queries. Okay, so using database access object, we can do insert, update, delete, and batch insert. So now let's look into an example and see how can we use database access object to perform these operations. Okay, so this is the controller which I have created, DAO controller, and I have written these actions in it, and each action correspond to the type of operation that we have to understand. So the first one is action insert. So in this, so this is the command object, and then we are calling the insert function on it. Okay, what are the arguments for the insert function? The first argument is the table name, right? So this is actually when you are configuring the table prefix in the database configuration. So this is how you have to write the table name. So I would discuss about it in detail when we come to configuring the table prefix topic. Okay, the next one is the column name and the corresponding value. So this is an array. The keys are the column names in the table, and these are the values corresponding to it. So here name is ms, email is test@gmail.com, and status is active. So this would return us a instance of command, and then we are calling the execute function on top of it. Okay, now let's look at the output on the browser. So okay, so I'm just hitting this query index. So right now it is returning only 2 rows. Right now I would execute DAO insert. Okay, I should refresh this screen. So only 2 rows. Right now let's do the insert. Okay, now refresh this screen. So record has been added successfully, right? Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about update. So here this is the function that we have to call, update function. This is the table name, right? And this is the new data, the data that has to be changed, right? And this is the condition. So we are checking for name here. So name is equals to colon name, and then we are binding the parameters corresponding to this colon name, right? So I'm just binding it to ms. So this query is equals to like update tbl client, set email is equals to this, and active status is equals to inactive, where name is equals to ms, right? So now let's look at the output on the browser. So right now email should be test@gmail.com, right? When we are executing the update, the email should change to hello@gmail.com, and status should change from active to inactive. Okay, so let's refresh the screen. Oh sorry, so right now it's okay. Now I would execute update over here. Okay, now refresh this screen. See, so email has been updated and status has been updated as well. Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about the delete command. So here you have to call the delete function, the table name, the condition, and then the params. So we are just deleting the record which we have inserted and then updated. Okay, so right now we have 3 records. Let's call delete over here. Okay, now refresh the screen. So this record is deleted. So this is how you execute the delete function. Okay, moving ahead, bulk insert, right? So in scenarios where let's say you have to insert 20 or 30 records, right? Now it would not be the right approach where you are using each record independently, because in that case you have to connect to the database, get the response back, then connect to the database and then get the response back. So it would be more costly operation, right? So in that case we have to use the batch insert. Okay, so in batch insert, what is the syntax? Okay, so this is the table name which you have to pass, then the columns which are going to be inserted, so name, email and status, right? And next one is the array of data. So the first array is, so we have name is sj, email is test1@gmail.com, status is active, and then the second data set, right? And then you call the execute function. So let's look at the output on the browser. So now we have only 2 records. Here I am saying bulk hyphen insert. Okay, now refresh the screen. Okay, so we have added 2 records successfully. So this is how you execute the bulk insert operation. Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about table prefix. Okay, so how can we configure table prefix? So we have to go in db.php over here and we have to set this property table prefix to tbl underscore, right? So you just provide your prefix over here and then in your queries, right, you can provide the table name like this. So this is how you can configure table prefix. Okay, moving ahead, let's talk about transactions. So first of all, when transactions are required. So transactions are required in cases where multiple related queries have to be executed in a sequence. So let's say for example you are inserting an order, right? So there is so much of data which is related to the order and you would have to insert in different order tables. For example, the default order information, then the address information of the customer, then the payment information of the customer, and then the history of the customer. So there is so much of there are so much queries which have to be executed in the sequence, right? And they are interrelated. So assume there is no transaction happening, we are not applying transaction, right? And the first 2 queries execute successfully, right? But the next query fails. So in that case the data inconsistency would happen in the database. So to avoid such scenarios we have to use the transaction, and that's the advantage of it. It ensures accuracy and consistency of data. So now let's see an example for it. Okay, so in query controller I have added a method called action test transaction, right? So here I am getting the db connection object, then I am starting the transaction over here, then I am inserting one record, then I am inserting another record, and here I am committing it. So when this statement is executed, the commit is set to off in the database. So these statements would be executed, but the data would not be committed into the database until this statement is executed. Means we are committing to the database. So let's test it out on the browser. So here I am commenting this statement, and let's see what happens, right? So I'm just going here in the table, I'm just deleting these 2 records, right? Okay, so On this screen we have only two records, right? Now I am saying query test transaction, right? Okay, now let's see. Okay, so no new records are added because that commit is set to off, right? And we have commented that commit statement, right? Now let's uncomment this statement and execute it on the browser. Okay, now run the transaction. Now refresh this screen. Okay, so the two records are inserted. Okay, one more point. So let's say one of these statements failed, right? So what would happen? The flow would enter into the catch block. Here exception is caught and then the transaction is rolled back, and then you can throw the exception which has occurred. So this is how you can use transactions when you are using E framework. Okay, so that's all for this tutorial. I hope this tutorial is useful to you. In case you have any questions, you can post them in the comment section, or you can send us an email at info@ushainformatique.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more such videos, and thank you very much for watching this video.